compliment you the entire time. He might be a little fresh.
The keystone in the arch of Star Wars.
For a show that I dearly love and admire, so thanks for having me.
Sorry, I'm getting like emotional.
And you got this hulking, scary dude with the big nose and the perfect hair.
I understand. This is a safe space. This is a safe space between you and I and all of your viewers.
Cassie and Jim on the beach, and people are like, no. I can literally hear people out there, no.
Rogue One was awesome. I love the Han Solo movie, and then, of course, I love The Mandalorian.
And like getting to talk to fans face to face and learn their names and just, get to hear their stories.
And in the world of Star Wars, there's a bunch of people who look different and are different species. There's lizard men. There's psychic baby swamp monsters.
I joke that the best thing about writing Princess Leia is everybody knows who she is, and the worst thing about writing Princess Leia is everyone knows who she is.
And also you get Ewoks, and I am definitely a lover of Ewoks.
You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Yes, it's a good thing. It's a great thing.
Well, welcome to Around the Galaxy, the Star Wars fan talk show. I am your host, Pete Fletzer. Thank you so much for hanging out. If you're hanging out with us live, that means that you are an Around the Galaxy patron. So thank you so much. Or maybe you're checking out our Patreon program for the first time tonight. And if so, for as little as $3 a month, you can join me and my co-host, Nick Milkey, when we do our live shows like the one we're doing tonight. And the great thing about Around the Galaxy, the thing that I try to bring every single time is sort of that magic moment when two Star Wars fans meet for the first time. Now, the fans that I get to talk to happen to usually be social media voices or actors or Oscar-winning effects artists or authors, as is the case tonight. Tonight, I am honored to bring a conversation to you with a gentleman who adorned my bookshelves in the mid to late 90s with books like X-Wing Rogue Squadron and Wedge's Gamble and the Krytos Trap, and of course Jedi and the Dark Tide Duology, Mr. Mike Stackpole. And tonight we are going to get his story and talk a little bit about the way things used to be before there was a story group, and talk a little bit about stories like Rogue Squadron, which are now getting a renewed sort of look, and get to know his journey. So without further ado, let me introduce Mr. Michael Stackpole. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Oh, my pleasure to be here. I'm doing great, thanks.
That is awesome. You are coming fresh off of GalaxyCon, which is one of the bigger conventions. And you were telling me before, hours of standing on concrete floors but meeting fans, which must be a real blast for you.
Yeah, it is. It's everybody, in my experience, has been extremely nice. They're very, very kind, very solicitous. Everybody, you get asked a lot of questions, and a lot of them seem to be the same, but everybody has got their particular piece of the answer that they want. That little detail that is important to them. The thing we've all been wondering for the last 25 years that we missed in the book, or we want to know if we really saw it there. It's a lot of fun getting to see, and like I say, it's kind of scary, but really cool. When literally at GalaxyCon, a young man came up to say hello, and started crying because when he was in high school, I guess it was a rough time for him, and Rogue Squadron was the book that he read as a refuge. And and that's just, you never think when you're just sitting down typing, how much impact you can have in somebody's life. But right. But it's and then that's not me having impact in his life. That's Star Wars having impact in his life.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he was talking about he's got a new book coming out, and we were talking about how you never know whose favorite book you are, right? There's somebody out there. I mean, and luckily through opportunities like GalaxyCon and podcasts and things, you get to hear from those folks. But yeah, I mean, books really, it's so cliche, but it's so true. They really do help take people away sometimes when they need it most. So
absolutely.
And you know, you have written some of the most beloved Star Wars books. Before we get into some of those books and what you're doing today, tell me a little bit about your first experience with Star Wars. When did you first see it? How did it impact you? How did you even get there? What was your story there?
You know, it would have been December of '76. A bunch of friends of mine growing up in Burlington, Vermont, we always saw a movie on Christmas Eve, and that was The Gauntlet. It was a Clint Eastwood movie, but they had a preview for this movie called Star Wars. And I mean, that was just mind blowing. And I think that the day after Christmas, I went down to a bookstore and bought the novelization.
Right.
And just thought that was brilliant. So when it finally made its way to Burlington, another guy at the office where I was, we basically took the day off, and the first showing was 11 o'clock in the morning. There were 14 people in the theater. You know, because just nobody knew at that point, right?
Right. Yeah.
You know, and then we went back with coworkers 3 nights later, and the theater was packed. You know, and that was just, you know, just mind blowing how fast that phenomenon blew up. So it was just very cool.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's interesting to. I'm fortunate that I get to talk to a lot of people who have had their different starts with Star Wars, and like you, I was 7 when I saw Star Wars in the theaters for the first time. But to be there, you know, it's hard to comprehend a world that didn't have Star Wars for most people who are Star Wars fans now. And yeah, that did exist, and it changed so many people's lives in some, you know, some cases directly, some cases indirectly. Did you have visions of being an author or something? Were you a science fiction fan or military novel type fan beforehand, or how did what were you doing at the time?
Yeah, I was in college at the time. Was going to be a teacher, but the idea of being a writer was always there. My grandfather had published a little tiny book of legal anecdotes in 1937. So, you know, as every family has it, there are acceptable occupations for you and unacceptable occupations. And, you know, among you know, lawyer or doctor or teacher, there was this little slim chance, it was slim as my grandfather's book, for being an author. And foolish me decided, sure, of course I can do that. I mean, couldn't anybody? And I should just half backtrack that when I was in first grade, I wrote a poem that my mother thought was great, and she sent it off to a magazine. So the first piece of mail I ever got addressed to me that was not a Christmas card or birthday card from a relative was a rejection slip. And so at you know, at age of 6, I swore eternal vengeance on publishing, and have been fighting that way ever since.
You know, most kids, they would have given up at that point, but not Michael Stackpole.
No. How dare you think I'm not good enough? You know.
So then they went on and you started. What were some of your earlier forays into novels?
Oh, you know, I mean, before I got to Star Wars, I had written a fantasy novel called Tally and Revenant, which eventually came out from Bantam, in fact. I had done a bunch of game tie-in novels, a bunch of BattleTech novels, and Dark Conspiracy was another game that I had done novels for. So I actually was sort of racked up about 12 novels, gaming based, before I got my first original novel out there. But that was Once a Hero, and that was with Bantam. And Bantam, of course, at the time had the Star Wars license, and Bantam was using Star Wars as a way to promote their authors. And so I was really lucky that they decided to take out a license tied to the X-Wing computer game.
Mm-hmm.
When they went through their list of authors, they needed somebody who could write military science fiction. Well, I had that with BattleTech. I could write on a deadline. Again, I'd had that from the gaming industry. I knew computer games because I designed computer games, Wasteland, Farmville 3, and such. You know, when they sort of ticked off all the boxes, I was the only guy in their stable that could hit all of those things. And lo and behold, you know, I remember my agent called, because I live in Arizona, so it was 6 a.m. When she called, and it was Bantam just offered you 4 Star Wars novels. I said yes. I mean, that was, you know, so I really, there was no deliberation on my part, you know, it was all locked and loaded at that point. But,
That's pretty funny. So she made this by the way you're doing this, right?
Well, I mean, you know, I certainly talked to her about the possibility of doing Star Wars stuff, but you know, that's every freelance writer. I mean, as you know, you're always caging for work. So, you know, you tell your agent, by the way, you know, if Bantam's ever looking,
right.
And then lo and behold. So.
Wow. And I mean, those 4 books came out like within, was it 18 months or so of each other? 2 years?
It was they came out one every 4 months.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. They just banged right out. Yeah.
No, so when you did you have the full 4 books like in mind, or did you kind of how did you go about creating this series?
So one of the things that happened was I got offered the books, and very shortly thereafter, I went to a convention, CoastCon, before anybody knew the books had been offered. And Tom Dupree, the editor at Bantam, announced at the convention that I had been given these 4 Star Wars novels at the Meet the Pros thing on Friday afternoon, or Meet the Guests. And throughout the weekend, everyone kept coming up to me saying, "Hey, congratulations on getting a trilogy. Congratulations on getting a trilogy." I'm not a dumb guy. You know, I realized everyone is expecting a trilogy.
Right.
Therefore, I'm writing 3 books plus 1. And then from Lucasfilm, the direction that I got from Lucasfilm was wonderful, which was, we want military science fiction. You know, please put you know, put aliens in, put women in the squadron, you know, just mix it up. And I got a later call that said, yeah, you probably want to use Wedge Antilles. But, you know, I mean, I was doing my research, and Wedge was obviously a character that you had to use if you were going to do Rogue Squadron. So, and I was the one who said, I said to them, I said, look, we know in the Tim Zahn books, in the Thrawn trilogy, that the New Republic has taken Coruscant. Let me tell the story about how they take it. Because I figured, even if nobody wanted to read about these anonymous characters,
right,
at least they would want to hear the history of how the Imperial capital fell.
Yeah.
So none of us were really expecting, we didn't know what to expect, and we really weren't expecting the first book to hit as hard as it did.
Yeah.
In its second week, it hit the New York Times bestseller list, which really proved to us that I mean, Wedge had a fandom that nobody had even guessed at,
right?
Which really was a product of the videotapes. I mean, when you play the tapes back to back, you notice Wedge.
Right.
You know, when you're going to the movie theater, unless you've seen it 50 times, you know, with the years in between and stuff, Wedge is easier to slip through the cracks.
Right.
So on the strength of the Wedge, boy, a lot of people went for that first book, and then they just kept following the story.
Yeah. And it's funny. I loved the X-Wing video game, the X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, all 3 of the versions of the game that came out. I loved those books, but you know what? I was younger, not paying attention, and I didn't make the direct connection somehow, and I don't know how I didn't do that until talking to you right now. I mean, it totally makes sense. But that's really interesting. And of course, you also, so you had the interest in that game, which was phenomenal. You had Wedge, you had Gavin Darklighter, you had new characters, and you had a very unique sort of that military style. And one of the things that I find really interesting about Star Wars, and it's a conversation that comes up with every different type of guest and author, is one of the things that makes Star Wars so appealing is it literally has something for everyone, whether you're coming in because you like the wizards and the princesses, or you love the strange worlds and aliens, or you love the military aspect. But these books really seem to catch on with the people who just dug the wars part of Star Wars.
Well, it was really interesting. The reaction that I would get back when the books were coming out was really, it sort of bifurcated. There were a lot of people, especially young men, young males, sixth graders, in fact, who really loved all of the dogfights.
Yep.
And they could not understand why there was all the other character stuff. And then there were the grown-up readers whose basic attitude was, can't you just put a box score at the end of the battle chapters so we know who lived or died, and then give us more of that character stuff?
Right.
And more to your point, with Star Wars, you have to have action, you have to have intrigue, a little bit of romance, you've got to have some humor, you've got to have some suspense. And getting all of those elements into a book, Star Wars is the universe is great for allowing you to do that. And I personally think that's what you need for a Star Wars novel, for a novel to be a Star Wars novel. You need all of those elements working in concert. And you also need to hit on all of the things that are part of that mythos. For example, there's no way that I could have done X-Wing stuff without Corran having a droid, without Whistler being there.
Right.
I mean, there had to be some sort of a relationship, back and forth between those two characters.
Right.
And you had to show that in your, in the books. Otherwise, it just isn't Star Wars.
Right. Yeah. It's true. And I think that's one of those things with the droids in particular. It's one of those sort of elements. And I was saying this to somebody when we were talking about Book of Boba Fett. I imagine you're keeping up with all those things. And it's funny. For my Star Wars is very heavy into kind of the adventure side, and I love the battles and those sort of things. And I don't often think about them as monster movies, but gosh, in the very first episode of Book of Boba Fett, you had that sort of perfect Harryhausen character or monster, but then you also had the droids, and you always have that droid interaction, and there's those things that just are sort of Star Wars hallmarks that end up playing such an important part. And I guess that's what your job as a writer is to make sure that this is, in order to make it Star Wars, I need to do these sort of things. I mean, you had the experience in writing other franchises. So how do you approach writing for a franchise that's not your own? Do you research in a particular way?
Well, every franchise is different, because every franchisee or franchisor, whichever it is, whoever's in charge, they always want different things. My degree is in history, and I remember my first meeting with Ciro Stoney at Lucasfilm. I said, hey, look, if this would help you, I can footnote the novel. I can show you where I took everything from. And she said, yeah, that'd be great. So, that was one of those things of just sitting down and researching the stuff. I have to give a big shout out to the guys at West End Games back then.
Yeah.
I come out of the gaming background, and when I got the assignment, I called a friend over there and I said, I need you to send me one of everything. And he said, does it need to be pretty, or can I give you scratch and dents? Can you take me? I said, whatever, I just need anything you can send me. And so, you do the research, you'd study the scripts to the radio shows, you'd read all of the novels, you'd study the movies over and over and over again. And then you'd be pulling stuff out of the West End Games products. And there were two types of footnotes that were in the books. One footnote would be, this is where I got this.
Mm-hmm.
The other footnote would be, I'm making this up. I need this for this reason in this story. Even if you can't give me all of these things, at least give me this
Mm-hmm.
To make it work. And Lucasfilm was great. They really, they never said no on anything. And this was really, really helpful also, because when I started doing the X-Wing comics with Dark Horse, we would have elements, and then, I'd be working with Tim and doing his books, where we'd have elements that were going between novels back and forth between the two of us. We would have things going back and forth within the comics.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I guess it was, I can't remember which book it was. No, it had to be the Back to War, where Booster gets the errant venture.
Mm-hmm.
He's given the errant venture at the end. And I had a footnote saying, I know we should not give Booster a Star Destroyer. However, Tim needs it in his next book. I did get a call from my editor at Bantam going, you say Tim needs this in the next book? Uh-huh. Okay, we'll leave it in. And, so, I mean, Lucasfilm was great, and they probably let me get away with some things I would not have let me get away with. But in those days, it was a very trusting situation. We all had, I knew what they wanted. And certainly, the fact that I could call Tim or I could call Kevin and say, what did you do with this? And then say, this is why I'm doing this. What do you need? It worked out really well. It was an absolute pleasure doing that stuff back in those days.
Yeah, I when I was fortunate enough to have Kevin J. Anderson on a while back, he talked about just the sort of that exchange. I mean, because it was pre-story group, right? Right now with the story group, and it's having the current authors on it, I recognize that the story group isn't sort of this council that sits and judges your books and your stories, but they keep that sort of continuity. But back in those days, like you were saying, you would literally pick up the phone. I know you and Timothy Zahn shared notes a lot, and so
sure.
There, how often would you maybe be speaking to Timothy or Kevin or somebody or Drew or and just get a sort of well, I was thinking about doing this with the story. Would you mind, other than like the Star Destroyer, did they ever say, I wouldn't do that because I'm planning to do this, or how were those conversations? How did they go?
Well, a lot of times it would be just real simple things of hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Is there anything that you're doing which that it would screw up? I mean, I remember very specifically for the end of iJedi, I called Kevin and I said, hey, in the Young Jedi Knights, do you ever do anything with Exar Kun's temple? And he said, nope. I said, great, I'm burning it down. And that was, as long as it wasn't going to cause a problem, we were in pretty good shape. And then for both Tim and I, again, back in those days, Lucasfilm actually asked us to take care of some continuity issues that had arisen, just because of the way that the comic strip in the newspapers went, or things happened in some of the early Dark Horse stuff where errors just got introduced.
Sure.
And so, I mean, this is why in the X-Wing books, in the source books, there were listed 2 shipyards that had created the Executor.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of rationalizing it as some made some components, or one made some components, one made the other components, I merely said, no, they made 2 of them. One was the Executor, the other was Lusankia. And all of a sudden, that continuity problem goes away.
Right.
And becomes entertaining. And so you get to do that. And that's part of the reason why in the Back to War, we had to go and free the prisoners. because we had to get Jan Dodona out of prison because he had shown up in a Dark Horse comic, even though he died in a newspaper strip. So, you know, and that was just that process of this is how we have to make these things work.
That's wild. It's amazing. And again, to your point, it was all entertaining, and it was a different time too, I guess, where people also weren't quite so actually on everything that might have come through. How did you respond to when Disney purchased Lucasfilm and that sort of any of the books that were written, any of the comics, any of the content that was created before the buyout? All of that, of course, became legends and no longer quote unquote canon. What was your response to that?
Well, look, all of us who worked in the universe knew that could happen. I mean, back when I was doing the X-Wing books, the Clone Wars happened 35 years earlier. Darth Vader was 56 years old in those movies, and those were facts. And, you know, you wrote the story playing around with that sort of stuff. The prequel movies come out, and all of a sudden the Clone Wars were 18 years earlier. So we all knew that could happen. And the two things about the making these stories into legends: one, they had to do that because we'd killed Chewie off. and you know, can you have a Star Wars movie without Chewbacca? So far, the answer is no.
So far, no, right?
So there's that. I think the second thing is that they did not want to sort of stifle any of the filmmakers feeling that they had to be tied to stuff that we had done. Both you didn't want to stifle their creativity. The other thing people keep forgetting is when you're writing a novel, your special effects budget is unlimited. I mean, so, you know, there were things that we do in those books that I'm pretty sure they can do now with special effects, but, you know, when they were looking at it, maybe not.
Right.
And I think the other thing that people keep forgetting is that essentially the second paragraph of that press release said that the EU would continue to be a resource that they would draw upon for future projects.
Right.
And what I love about this is it seems that, you know, when people come in to work on projects, they pretty much say, here you go, knock yourself out.
Right.
And they get to put together, you know, picking and choosing elements from stories and stuff. And I just think that is really, really cool. I mean, it's got to be as exciting for them as it was for any of us, basically being told the same thing.
Right. It's just thanks to you and Timothy Zahn and Kevin J. Anderson and everybody else, there's more of it for them to pull from. So, well, speaking of pulling from things, I don't know about you, but when they announced a film called Rogue Squadron by Patty Jenkins, my first thought was they're making the book. Now, I think we're all pretty clear that it's not specifically that, but first of all, what was your response? And over the weekend, you had mentioned to somebody that you've actually spoken to Patty a little bit about the movie.
Okay, let's clarify the...
You can clarify the tweet.
Let's clarify the tweet.
Okay.
Because what's really funny is that I did not say to this person at GalaxyCon anything that I have not been saying since the film was announced.
Right.
And not including anything that is not public knowledge.
Right.
What I found is when I'm talking to people talking to people about it, there are a lot of people that still don't know. I mean, I can tell people, by the way, I don't know if you know, but Patty Jenkins is going to be doing Rogue Squadron. Half the people I talk to go, really? There's going to be a movie?
Right. Well, that's true.
You're a Star Wars fan? Come on. You know, so
where's your card? Turn it in.
Yeah. Exactly. You know, I remember the day very well. It was a Thursday. Two friends of mine, you know, shot me text messages going, have you seen it yet? You know, which is, and of course me just texting back going, seen what? and they go to your computer. Here's the link. And I mean, I was blown away. And I mean, I just thought that was fantastic. I've loved Patty Jenkins's work, and that she was going to do that, I thought was fantastic. And I sent out a tweet really quickly, just saying, "Hey, this looks really cool. I cannot wait. I'll be first in line. And more power to you. Fantastic."
Right.
And she very nicely responded and said, "Look, what you did is foundational to what we're doing." So again, this is all, and I know the tweet said, that she had consulted with me.
Right.
No.
That's not the reason for the delay. It's not you're too busy to talk to her. That's not.
No.
I'm kidding.
What? And like she needs to talk to me. Holy crap! I mean, I think she knows her way around a film. This is just,
probably, yeah.
So, and so it's again, in things that she has said about the story publicly, she has been very nice in name checking me and referring to the books. And I I can't thank her enough for doing that. But as of this point, I know only as much as you guys know, and I still will be first guy at the theater to to go see it. So
no, and I'm glad you cleared that up, because I think as much as we would I think we're just excited that the as fans of that series, just to know that there's some sort of, first of all, the fact that Patty tips the hat to it is really phenomenal, and I think that's one of the things that has helped. I don't know if helped is the right word, but I mean, as you know, from going to the different conventions, you hear various perspectives. There are people who are really truly I don't know if offended is the right word or not, but that the EU stuff is now not canon, and they're not and I understand it, because this was years of their life. That was, as you said, the fan who broke down in tears because that was so important to him at that time. But I think it's phenomenal that we are seeing things from Tim's books, from Kevin's books, and from yours starting to make their way into what is now considered canon. What particular things, of your favorite pieces of books, what are some things that you would like to see on screen, and or again, you're not consulting, but what are the things that you think would make a great connection to the current canon?
Boy, that's
a loaded question.
It's a really loaded question. I mean, the fast thing, obviously, I mean, I love the characters that I worked on and created and everything like that. So, I'd love to see all of it.
Right.
But realizing that's not going to be possible.
Right.
I think that whatever gets brought forward, I think I know it's going to be handled really, really well. And so I'm just looking forward to seeing what other people's interpretations are of some of these things. I think there are some characters that are really, really well loved. I mean, surprisingly to me, well loved. Tycho. There's a lot of fans of Tycho, and I never imagined that. Gavin has got his following, and obviously Corran Horn has got a lot of people who really like him. So seeing any of them showing up on screen would be great. And I wish I could. In part, the question catches me off guard because I spend so much time not thinking about that because I don't want to drive myself insane. And as you alluded to earlier, I mean, I'm loving all the stuff they're doing on Disney Plus, and all of those things. I mean, I think that's just a load of fun. So I just sort of want to be like the kid at Christmas, watching, being able to open the presents and going nuts. Though I will tell you, just as an example, I will tell you, when the first of the new movies came out, I was heading back to Vermont for Christmas but a friend of mine had gotten me tickets for a screening on Thursday night. I literally was flying out on a red eye, so got to see the movie before I went on a red eye. And I'm just sitting in the movie watching it, and there's that the first scene where the X-wings come in over that lake,
Yeah.
and lake effect spray and everything like that, and I audibly gasped when I saw that. And she laughed, and I just looked and said, "They stole that from me, you know." So it's seeing that magic of what you've had in your mind,
Yeah.
getting to see it on the screen is just so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that I want more people to remember that these are there is homage to all that stuff. Nothing, not, I think one of the interesting concepts, and when I remember talking to Steve Sansweet once years and years ago. Actually, I was at a Star Trek convention because Star Wars conventions didn't exist, and we were talking about how Star Trek kind of has the books are stories about the characters versus the TV shows and movies were what actually happened. And I think that that's the great thing about the books that were written in the 90s and the early 2000s is that they tell the stories, the legends of these characters, and in every legend there's a bit of truth. And it would be great to see some of those characters, what quote unquote really happened, perhaps. Yeah. Is there any Star Wars story that you'd like to tell? Is there any like any gap, anything that's out there that you would love to dive into and write yourself?
Well, I think it's a question of not so much story that I would want to tell. It's characters that I would enjoy playing with again. Baron Fell, I would love to do more with him. He was always just a lot of fun. Love to write more about Corran. I would love to write more about Wedge, or literally write more about the squadron.
Yeah.
In whatever iteration it comes out into. Just because I feel real comfortable with those characters and exploring. It's kind of weird for readers, because readers think in terms of stories. Writers know that the story is there, but for us, I think we're sort of moving through the story with the characters, and you have that initial idea, but how the characters interact with it shapes it into something else.
Right.
If you didn't have the characters and their reactions, you wouldn't have the things going on that they get you emotionally involved in the stories. And so just getting back and seeing where those characters are and where their lives have led. I mean, to a certain extent, I got to do that, especially with Corran. Also, in Conspiracy with Tim and Aaron, we got Wedge Antilles married off. Because otherwise the only people that ever had sex in that universe were Jedi. And so, I wrote a 4-page paper explaining why that should be allowed, so that we could have that set in time for a union.
Love it. That's great. That's funny. I know you said you like all of your characters, but one of our patrons, Matt Harrington, wanted to know if you have a particular favorite one. You said Corran, and I don't know if that's because you got to be his picture in the Star Wars game card game, or I remember those games. I didn't honestly. Yeah. Until I was preparing for this, I didn't realize that was you and Timothy Zahn in that picture.
Yeah. That was that was a thing in and of itself. Well, here's the thing about Corran, because I Jedi was written in first person. There were a number of people who had never read the X-Wing books because it came out as a hardback, so they'd never read the X-Wing books. And all of a sudden, here's this character showing up, and why is he the star of this story? And certain people decided that it was just me writing me into the universe. The fact is, Corran and I are nothing alike, and other than general height and eye color, I'm not even sure I would like him. because he's an arrogant fighter jock. He was a cop. I mean, there's something about him. I'm sure we'd rub each other the wrong way, and we'd never be friends. But I think because I spent so much time in his head. If I had to pick one character out, I would say that he was probably my favorite.
That's cool. That's interesting. Yeah. So I mean, it's you're now you've been a number of years removed, and then they reissue X-Wing Rogue Squadron. How did that feel? And when did that what came out of that? How did that come about?
Oh, I think the announcement for the movie was the driving force behind that.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew that they were doing the Essential Legends program, and I was sort of wondering how long it would take before they were doing Rogue Squadron or iJedi. iJedi was the other one I thought that they would probably do. But I think that the announcement of the movie certainly accelerated that choice. And everybody I've seen really I've again at shows, you end up signing a lot of copies of that. So people want a souvenir of their childhood.
Yeah.
And it's a gorgeous looking book. And actually, I just read it back here is the second one is Wedge's Gamble. When I got back from GalaxyCon, a box of them was sitting on my doorstep.
Oh, awesome.
So I guess they go on sale in 2 weeks, but
it's great. It's great that the series is coming back. Like I said, it was one of those. I mean, it's funny, and I think when you talk to people who live through what it's funny. People have often called that sort of period between Return of the Jedi and Phantom Menace is sort of the dark times, but the reality is there was so much content for people who wanted to read the books and the comic books, and that became the Star Wars entry point for a lot of people. And it's great that they're bringing them back, and it's got to be great for you to be revisiting that. Are you seeing new fans to the books, or is it what's sort of the mix of people you're talking to?
Well, it's when you say new fans, what's kind of interesting is that there always is an influx of fans. I mean, there are people like you and me who were able to read them when they were coming out. But I've been talking to people who in their 20s. I mean, the books are older than they are.
Right.
Okay. And this has been consistent down through the years. People are always discovering the X-Wing books. And just ripping right through them and going through mine, going into Aaron's and just devouring these books.
Yeah.
Which is unbelievably cool.
Yeah.
So you see, I again see people, my age or slightly older, down to kids in grade school who just discovered it. And it's really neat that they still have that the books still have legs and still appeal.
Yeah, there's that timelessness of Star Wars, which is it's incredible. I have a 9-year-old son, and he's as into it as I was when I was 9 years old. It's just that lucky for him, he's got 40 years worth of content. I was still in the first movie at the time, so that's pretty great. So what have you been working on? What's been keeping you busy from a writing perspective recently?
Let's see. Most recent thing was I had a Gears of War novel come out. And so that came out, I think, last September. That was kind of my my pandemic job. The pandemic was the pandemic was. I've talked to a lot of different writers, and for many of us, the pandemic was really kind of brutal. Just because when you're a writer and you're gonna, I think, do it really well, you have to be injecting emotion into a lot of the story. And to understand emotion, you've got to be open to a lot of emotions. And that was there was fear and anger, and everything of the dark side was basically what was percolating through that time. So it
Right.
got to be pretty brutal. And so I didn't do too much during that, but the Gears of War novel actually was that was very helpful in helping me recover from that.
Mm.
I've got some more BattleTech stuff I'm doing. I'm finishing up a Dark Souls novel, and I just did a proposal and sent it off to my agent. Proposal for another fantasy series. So
That's great. Do you find that you I mean, obviously you enjoy writing in different franchises. Do you have plans to create or go back to some of the original franchise or the original content that you started, or is that do you find that you enjoy working in the franchise universes?
what I enjoy is getting paid.
Oh, okay, that's true. You can't. Nobody will begrudge you. Hey, look, it's that freelance thing. I get it.
It is that freelance thing. Yeah, I mean, I like doing original work. And so and it also during 2021. Basically, I took a year to work on this proposal for this series,
Mhm.
putting it together at the same time, obviously writing that novel, but sort of alternating back and forth, and getting it to a point where I thought the characters were interesting enough, the story was interesting enough that both someone would want to publish it and I'd actually want to write it.
Right.
And that's that's kind of the key there. In terms of franchise work, it's doing franchise stuff is kind of like going to the prom. You can have the dress in the closet, you can have the corsage in the in your fridge, but if nobody calls and invites you, you're not going anywhere.
Right.
So it just depends. And when I get offered a job in a franchise, um, I look for a lot of different things, and one of the things I look at is the audience for this franchise an audience that I don't already have?
Mm.
Will it expand my readership? And second thing is, if I do this, will people who already read me still be interested? Will this be a book that will appeal to them?
Right.
So that's so those are different things. And then obviously you look at how popular is the project. I mean, when somebody comes to you and says, "Hi, do you want to do a Dark Souls novel?" You really don't say no.
Right. Right.
With Gears of War, you just don't say no.
Yeah.
And working with the Gears people again, they were absolutely great. They were wonderful to it was very much of a collaboration of this is sort of what they wanted. And I
Mhm.
said, yeah, I can do that, but I also have to do this.
Hmm.
And they said, okay, that sounds good to us. And it's like, and what style would you like? What style do you want for the thing? And so, we went through the menu of choices, and it all worked.
That's great. That's great. Well, Michael, I have a 10 question segment that I do on the show where it's sort of a inside the actor's studio, but they're all Star Wars related questions. So
Okay.
there's no wrong answers. I won't judge you, but the internet will. So don't worry
Well,
about
there
it.
you go. Yeah. Work. I will judge me. So
Right. Yes. Yeah. Well, you're everybody. I know anybody who's creative is also their worst critic. So,
absolutely.
but so the first question is, what's your favorite Star Wars movie, TV show, or book?
Empire Strikes Back. I mean, that's just always going to be the one that holds my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't tell you. I would say 80% of the people I've spoken to in the 3 years I've been doing the show say Empire, but there's got to be a reason for it. It just works. It's powerful. One of the things that I say that I've taken notice about it is that it's as great as all the prequels and the sequels are. This Empire Strikes Back was really the first movie to expand the lore, right, and really to start to give us other force powers and things like that. And so without that, we don't get to even get your books. So pretty phenomenal. Okay, what's your favorite non-Star Wars movie?
Boy, that's a tough one, because I mean, there's just so many brilliant movies out there,
and it changes daily, I'm sure.
Yeah, but one that seems to keep circulating around on the list, or at least one of the ones that I keep on the iPad for when I'm stuck on a plane, is Kelly's Heroes.
Oh wow!
It's a World War II caper movie.
Mm-hmm.
Got a great soundtrack. Great actors. It's got a lot of humor. Got a lot of drama. So it's one that I can just sit down and watch, and it feels good.
Were you always a sort of a military movie and book fan your whole life, or did that just sort of evolve for you?
Well, when I was growing up, I think on television, you almost every Saturday you would get a war movie at some point or other.
Right.
So you just get used to that, and occasionally you'd get science fiction, and then when Star Trek started into heavy rotation, syndication, then it was really easy to get your daily hit of science fiction.
Yeah.
So
that's great. Okay. Hey, describe Star Wars in 3 words or less. See, now I'm your editor. You got fewer words here, Michael. Fewer words.
I don't know. I don't know that I can.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can.
That's fair. Hey, that's you're the first one to ever pass on a question, but you know what? Hey, you're Michael Stackpole. You can pass on a question if you like. Now, if I have any other guests say Michael did it,
next time I get arrested, I'll tell him you said that.
Yeah, no, it's fine. next time you're getting arrested a lot, Michael. Is it?
We'll move on to the next question now.
Yeah, let's move on quickly. Okay, what's your favorite Star Wars sound effect?
Wow, that's interesting. I guess the Wookiee roar. I guess that one is so iconic to Star Wars.
The you said what? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, a Wookiee's roar.
Oh, Wookiee's roar. Yeah. Yep. It's yeah, and there's something about Star Wars too that just is so. You want, like, when I found out, I wanted to become, I wanted to learn as much as I could about the different sounds and just the way they created it. And again, it's that and TIE Fighter, I think, are 2 things that if you didn't know what they belong to, they would sound weird, but when you see it, it becomes iconic. And that, I think, is one of the things that makes it a favorite for many people. So that's cool. What's your favorite, what or who is probably a better question? Who is your favorite droid?
Ooh, my favorite droid. I got to say R2D2. I mean, that's, quite frankly, if it weren't R2D2, I never would have lavished as much love on Whistler. So.
Yeah. It's hard to go wrong with R2. I mean, he's been there for everything, right? So not as much in the sequels as I would have liked, but it's a conversation for another time, perhaps. Yeah. So, which Star Wars character would you like to be most, and why?
Well, I mean, probably Han Solo. Seen so much of the universe, and always gets the girl, that's also important, So.
Right. What were your thoughts on Solo and Rogue One, the first stories that were kind of outside the
I enjoyed Rogue One a lot, and I think I've only seen it the once, but I liked it very strongly and wouldn't mind seeing it again. I thought the only criticism that I had for Solo, and this is just personal taste, and just how I feel also in writing, is that I felt that a lot of the things we came to know Han for, shooting first or not, and all of the little trademark quirks that were Han, I thought that in Solo they tried to tease and dot all of the I's.
Right.
And it would have been for me personally, I would have left some T's uncrossed, some I's undotted, so we had things to do in later stories.
Right.
But that's personal preference.
Sure.
Professional preference. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's great. What is your favorite Star Wars collectible? Every Star Wars fan has some collectibles.
To be quite honest, and this is really sort of inside baseball. There is a 2-pack of figures that has Baron Fell and Wedge Antilles, if I'm remembering right. And I just love the hell out of that. And in part, it's because that was the first one I ever saw of a character I'd created being made into a figure. I literally, a package got dropped on my doorstep one day, and I opened it up. It was from a Dark Horse, and it was these character packs and comic books together, and it was just, that was one of those moments you never think will happen to you, and then bang, there it is. So it was very cool.
That's a great one. That's awesome. If you could own any spaceship or vehicle from the Star Wars universe, asking the guy who wrote the X-Wing series, which vehicle would you want to own? I don't know if you're allowed to say anything other than X-Wing, but I'll give you the chance.
No. Hands down, it would be an X-Wing. There's absolutely no bloody doubt. 100% X-Wing.
Excellent. That's great. What's your favorite Star Wars moment?
Wow. There are just so many of them that are just so cool. I think in some ways it is Luke entering Jabba's palace. That first time we see Luke having come into his power. I mean, that was fantastic. And what was very cool is watching that echoed in Mandalorian.
Yeah.
You just have goosebumps when you see that going on. So
yeah. This isn't one of the questions, but sort of maybe respond to, as somebody who wrote in the universe, created things, and also referenced things in the universe. There's two sides of the coin with what we've seen, more so probably in Book of Boba Fett maybe than Mandalorian, but both were very much offered up sort of what people deemed as fan service. Maybe react to the phrase fan service for a franchise like Star Wars.
Well, I think that if I have an objection to the scourge, which is the internet, it is that people have, for the purposes of their own self-satisfaction, or maybe just for trolling, have taken things that are basically benign and tried to attribute to them, tropes that aren't right. Hey kids, not every story is a Mary Sue.
Right.
Just because you don't like the main character doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the main character,
right.
And that sort of thing. And so, when I hear fan service, and when I think about it, it means that you as a writer or a performer have tapped into part of the zeitgeist. You've tapped into something is going to get a reaction, and you hand it to people.
Right.
And it's fan service when they like it.
Right.
It's something else when it makes them feel bad or makes them feel hurt. But that's our job as creators, is to play with your emotions.
Right.
Because that's the only way we get you to react.
Right.
And for everything that is good fan service, there's got to be something that hurts you. Otherwise, you won't know that this is good stuff. So, in the Book of Boba Fett, there was tons of lovely fan service. Some of it I liked, and so I recognized that it was brilliant fan service. Some of it I didn't like, or didn't work for me, I should say. And so that was something that just fell flat.
Right.
But there's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
So I mean, people make it sound as if they were going through every page in the script saying, "Oh, and what's the fan service we can have on this page?"
Right.
No,
Yeah.
stop being critical. Just go with the flow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I think that there's one of the challenges with where I think the franchise sits at 45 years old this year is that we all bring our own baggage with it, whether it's somebody like me who saw it when I was a kid, somebody like you who literally created in that universe, or even somebody who's brand new to it. I've said this before. I had admittedly, when I saw the final episode of Book of Boba Fett, in my head, I had written it, right? I knew it was going to happen, and I was wrong, of course. Because that's the great thing about stories. If you know what's going to happen, it's not such a great story.
Right.
And so I walked away from watching it the first time a little bit like, that was good. Wasn't great. Then I watched it with my 9-year-old son, who saw it the way I would have seen it. And was like, that was amazing. He rode a Rancor in, and they were fighting in the streets against giant robots. And I was like, you know what? You're right. That was amazing. And I think it's difficult with and it's an interesting sort of study of Star Wars because of where it is as a franchise and the role it plays in people's history and their lives and what they bring to it. And I guess it's the old cave in Dagobah, right? It's only what you bring with you, right?
Right.
And sometimes, to your point, like when you go to see Rogue Squadron in the theater, you need to somehow separate yourself from the book that you wrote and what Patty Jenkins has created, and just go in and let it wash over you and be that kid again, that first time seeing Star Wars.
Well, and I've been really lucky that for the past 20 some odd years, because I haven't been working in the universe, that I've really gotten to that place of being able to be a fan again.
Mm-hmm.
If I get a phone call tomorrow and get given a contract and now all of this is work,
right,
that will change. But until that point, no, I'm just there like anybody else, just eating my popcorn and waiting to be wowed. And it feels really, really, really good.
Yeah. Well, in a way, I think you were. I would dare say you were lucky to have written in the time you did, because you were able to contribute to it and then go back to being a fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've been able to do both, which is pretty wild. So my last question on the 10 questions is, what is your go-to Star Wars quote?
Well, that's funny. I don't necessarily know that I have a go-to Star Wars quote, just because I've tried to avoid having a go-to Star Wars quote, so I won't seem to be totally consumed by Star Wars, which just that's my own vanity. But I think the one that echoes through my brain a lot is, I have a bad feeling about this, because that one is just so good. And of course, you hear it in all sorts of movies, read it in all sorts of books and stuff. So I mean, that one really tapped really tapped into humanity.
Yeah. That's great. It's a great quote, and and the great thing is this is one. It's one of those things where that's why I say go-to quote, right? Not favorite quote, because then it becomes, so what's my life philosophy, and it always becomes a Yoda quote at that point. So yeah, but that's wild. Well, Michael, this has been an amazing conversation, and I really appreciate you spending time with us. Tell people where they can keep up with you online.
Probably the easiest way they keep up with me is on Twitter, just at Mike Stackpole. I also have a Patreon project, so patreon.com/Michael A. Stackpole, which has got some fiction on there and things on that order. I'm doing on there. I'm doing a sequel to a fantasy novel that it came out about 25 years ago. And people have always asked if I do a sequel, and it's like, okay, sure, finally. And we're nearing the end of that. So
That's great. Well, Michael, thank you so much. This was great, and I hope to speak to you again sometime.
This has been a pleasure, and I would love to.
Awesome. Cool. Before I let you go, if I could get you to say this is Michael Stackpole and you're listening to Around the Galaxy, that would be awesome.
This is Michael Stackpole, and you're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Excellent. Let me just hit the